punish Americans. Canadians have to pay more, so they protect their economy, they protect their market, and then rather than actually defend their country, subsidize Canadians at the cost of you, the American worker. By the way, if something goes down with China, we're fighting them alone. Now, let me explain the trade war situation.
Hope he finds love.
Yeah, that people are. Oh, he has many times. That people are explaining, and it's kind of, I get why it becomes difficult. You'll get brilliant economists on both sides giving you an entirely different projection. You realize why that is when you look into it. They simply choose where along the logic trail they want to stop. This is the conclusion I want, I'll stop. You can start with Donald Trump decided to basically enact reciprocal tariffs. Or you can start with Canada already had tariffs. You can end at, and Canada issued counter tariffs and that will hurt the American people. Or you can end at, actually this may fundamentally restructure our trade agreements and alter the economy for the better. You can choose where you start and you can choose where you end. So I'm trying to give you some scope here. Let's set this up with something really clear. This administration has asked for something simple, not even necessarily removing their tariffs. President Trump has asked for Canada to secure its border. Secure your border, your half, and stop the drugs. If Canada does that, it's over. The terms were issued, very clear. Secure your border, stop the drugs, no more tariffs. But now you have people saying that Trump has started a trade war and that we already have free trade with Canada and really they've been our ally. And Trudeau said, I've been stabbed in the back, and you even have people virtue signaling in the Canadian Conservative Party. Okay, let me lay a foundation for you. Some key indisputable facts. Okay, number one, Canada does have tariffs. They've had tariffs for a long time. You've seen the numbers circulating. They're quite a bit more complicated than that, but Canada has had tariffs that are significantly more than the United States. Okay, key fact number two. Canada does this as a form of economic protectionism, by their own words, while criticizing the USA for doing the same. That's why they have these tariffs, for example, like dairy. We'll get into that. Key fact number three. This actually ends up hurting Canadian consumers far more than the USA and far more than Canadians realize. Key fact number four. Free trade, meaning if these tariffs from Canada went away, would effectively mean that Canada would be the 51st state. Without these tariffs and government protectionism and artificial creation and manipulation of markets, Canada would cease to exist. Let me break this down a little. Get this claim from the left. They say, well, hold on, the tariffs that exist, for example, like on dairy, because you've seen numbers come out from the right, and those aren't fully accurate. So people on the left say, well, those aren't real. Like the dairy tariffs, they only exist at certain quotas, it's tiered, so really they're insignificant. It takes a while to reach that tier. Okay, here's the truth. This doesn't need to be complicated. The top end tariff is the tariff, okay? In other words, if you have from X gallons to X million gallons, it's 2%, and there's, okay, what's the top end tariff? It's 240%, that's the tariff. That is the effective tariff, and it determines if there is a market at all. So let's use dairy as an example. And the reason I'm using dairy is because you've heard people say, well, really, without the oil, we don't have the trade deficit with Canada. And dairy is like 1% of the market. So why are people looking at these taxes? That doesn't matter. Okay, let me clarify this for you. The dairy tariffs are between 240 and 300%. Okay, jeez. For American dairy going into Canada. Now that's the top end tariff. That's the tariff. It doesn't matter what the rates are before that. That is the rate. Because here's the truth. Why would you invest, right? Why would you export dairy to Canada, for example, if you know that you're going to hit that ceiling really early on and you're going to be paying 240%? There's no way for it to be profitable. We create more dairy in the state of Wisconsin than all of Canada. If they didn't have that tariff, let me ask you this. You don't think that dairy farmers in Wisconsin would love to have an open new market of 30 million new people? And by the way, 30 million new people, or 40 million, I believe, in Canada now, 40 million people who would be ecstatic to pay the prices that Americans pay for milk. Because here's another truth. The Canadian tariffs hurt Canadians dramatically. Let me give you a comparison here. Milk, by the gallon in the US, it's about $3.50 to $4 right now. Canada, it's over $8 a gallon. $8 a gallon. So what happens is this tariff, they create it to say, well, if the United States, if we just let them ship their milk over, we'd have no dairy industry. Exactly, you'd be the 51st state. If we just allowed the United States, really, when we're talking about anything, energy, beef, well, exactly, you would be the 51st state. If we had truly free trade, you wouldn't be able to sustain yourself because you're a giant country with no defenses of which to speak, and the United States would effectively run all of your markets. So Canada implements economic protectionism. And they tell you, if we don't do this, Canadian industry wouldn't survive. Exactly. But you can't justify doing it to us. That's the issue. And you certainly can't complain if we do it. $3.99 on average for a gallon of milk here in the United States, over $8 right now in Canada. Milk, the drink, specifically of the Canadian elites. And the overall cost of living in Canada is much higher. And this is a bigger problem when we get to military spending in a bit, okay? So let me give you gasoline. United States, the average price right now, excluding California, because they're more like Canada, and it's an outlier, it's under $3. It's about $2.95 a gallon. Canada right now, adjusted for the exchange rate, $4.22 a gallon. And that's actually closer than it's been for most periods in my lifetime. The average housing price, United States, $346,000. Canada, $487,000. Canadian salaries are 37% less than in the United States. Their goods are so much more expensive in Canada, specifically because the United States cannot actually engage in free trade. I remember when I was a kid paying Canadians, comment, GoldenEye was out of reach for me as a middle-class Canadian because it was $80 for one Nintendo 64
Oh my
game.
gosh.
It's $80.
What were they, 50 here in the States? 50?
I mean,
50?
modern
50
PS5
right.
games are 60.
Yeah, it was $80 plus in Quebec 15% sales tax.
Wow.
So I couldn't afford it. So what ends up happening is you have these tariffs, it locks out American businesses, and that hurts Canadian consumers. Here's the thing, it's a much higher cost of living and they make less. Well, it's okay because then the Canadian government subsidizes a lot of Canadians. Things like free health care, right? Social safety benefits, social welfare. You have welfare benefits. You have the social safety net of Canada, what they brag about all the time. Have you been meeting your defense budget? Punish Americans. Canadians have to pay more, so they protect their economy, they protect their market, and then rather than actually defend their country, subsidize Canadians at the cost of you, the American worker. By the way, if something goes down with China, we're fighting them alone. You guys know that, right? None of these NATO nations are going to do anything. Also, let's think about this. Think about this for a second. Something goes down with China, and this is what this is about. We can't be wasting money in Ukraine because we have to prepare for China. They just posted yesterday that they were ready for war. Let's assume that happens. We can't depend on anybody else. We have to be ready for that. What would make us more equipped to be ready for China than taking over a country to our north that could not defend themselves, that has been a horrible neighbor playing unfairly? We could more than double our land capacity, more than double our resources, natural resources, and open up a market, which, by the way, would make goods and services cheaper for Canadians and Americans alike. If the United States was an empire, Canada is a 51st state. If there is true free trade, Canada is a 51st state. They subsidize, protect, tariff, blame us if we match it, because they know if they didn't do that, they are the 51st state. And that's also why they desperately don't want Canadians to know this, because you'd have a lot of Canadians in Western Canada, this sense of pride. If they understood how much they are overpaying, might actually want to become a part of the USA. Comment if you're Canadian and you understand that.
A lot of Canadians come here to buy stuff. I think they understand a little bit.
I think a lot of them do. Now a lot of them are complaining. This also, by the way, is based on a false premise. This has been a mutually beneficial relationship between Canada and the United States.
Sure.
And they're stabbing us in the back. That's only true if you operate from the premise that Canada even needs to exist. It doesn't. It does not. And you have a lot of stuff that we need and a lot of stuff that we want. You want it to be fair? Great. Take off all your... First off, all we're asking right now is make sure that millions of Americans can't die from the drugs that come through your country, is take care of your side of the fence. That's it. You do it, it's over. But do you really want us to do digging into the economics? You subsidize a welfare state for your country at the cost of the American worker and our tax dollars going to a military that protects your country because you can't do it. Stand there with your hand out and bitch about how we do it. You're going to turn off American power? Mr. Ford? All right, let's see how this goes. I say this because I am from Canada. I know how many of them think. No, there are plenty of good Canadians, but I certainly know how Trudeau thinks. I certainly know how the Liberal Party thinks. I would say it's outright evil, and it needs to change. This has been No Canada. Hey, if you liked this video, you can comment or hit like. And you know that because you and I were a lot alike. Probably like dogs. I like dogs. If you like cats, I don't want you here. I'm not making videos for cat people. I told you, if you're a cat, I don't want you here. I'm not doing it. Not doing it for cat people. Dog person, click there. Cat person,